I mean, the reaction thus far in places like California and New York have been pretty fascinating to watch because they're certainly not passing gun restrictions with that framework in mind that you just mentioned there, right?
No, I think they're doing this really emotionally, and what's happening is, let me back up just a hair. You have some places like, say, Maryland, that by order of the governor have changed how they can give out their permits. You've got, even in California, the Attorney General now said that they pretty much have to be shall issue, not discretionary the way they were, based on the California law. Uh, and you've got some other places that have, are basically talking about, they haven't changed the laws necessarily, but they talk about they won't be enforced the same way they were. So we've already seen some motion from the legal side of the anti-gun states where some of them realize they're in trouble, and they don't want to have to relitigate it. But then you've got, like you mentioned, New York, California, where they've passed a whole bunch of new laws as well. Particularly California, which is, I think it's now something like 9 laws they've passed roughly that, to attack gun rights, with more on the drawing board, some sitting on the governor's desk to sign into
Some
law.
which you've already
And so we
challenged
have,
as well. We'll get to that later, but yeah.
yeah. So there's a whole lot to challenge. I view this whole thing now in post Bruen, that I'm looking at things in like 3 or 4 tiers of what we're going to be looking at. One, because of Bruen, we have, the key states we're looking at are like New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, California, New Jersey, and Hawaii, which had a lot of restrictive laws on the books. And then California, of course, with all their new proposed legislation. Again, even though the Attorney General gave out a letter to law enforcement that they can't enforce some of the laws the way they're enforcing them. And even the New Jersey Attorney General did the same thing, that they can't enforce some of the laws the way they were enforcing them. And in New York, they've sort of said that on the legal side of it, to the law enforcement, but then they've, passing all kinds of new legislation and redefining things in New York. Our 2 biggest problems right now really are New York, California, and New Jersey, just a step behind them. That's my the tier 1 area.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's only part of tier 1, I guess, because New York, as an example, they're trying to redefine sensitive places, which is going to be forthcoming litigation on the tier 1 side, like making Times Square and blocks around it, a gun-free zone, so to speak, where you can't carry a firearm even if you're licensed to do so. So now we have to give you the license, but we're saying you can't carry the gun in these places. And of course, what they'd like to do is make the whole city of New York a sensitive place and make the permit system like non-existent anyway.
And they've also like flipped the usual standard for private property on its head, because in every other state, basically, you have to post if you don't want somebody to carry into your place of business. You have to post a sign that says no guns. Whereas New York is now is trying to flip it the opposite way and saying you can't carry unless the store has posted that they allow it, which is a monumental shift that would have a pretty massive impact on where people can actually legally carry guns.
Yeah,
right?
And of course,
that
puts the burden on the store owner, shopkeeper, to post it, and if they don't get around to it, you just don't get to carry your firearm. It's almost like a negative checkoff system, and historically that doesn't hold up very well in the courts. So I'm not sure they're going to get away with that. We also have what we're looking at in our tier 1 is I guess non-resident carry. A lot of states still, even complying with Bruen, so to speak, with their current laws, don't want non-residents to be allowed to carry. So we're looking at a lot of non-resident suits now, because your right to carry a firearm shouldn't stop at your state border. And the Bruen decision, I think, helps us out a whole lot in those areas as well. We're also looking at abusive licensing systems, some that existed before and some that are going to be coming in place of some of these new laws. But, putting all kinds of requirements, making it next to impossible to go through the system, excessive fees, excessive time constraints, discrimination because of your political views. I mean, we're now looking at places like New York. They're talking about how they want to look at your, Facebook post before they say you have good character to be able to, apply for the permit and get it. And we're looking at that happening federally as well, with a lot of members of Congress pushing in that direction. So there's a whole lot of areas there as well. And then we're looking at disclosure. privacy rights, where a lot of these states are now looking at, well, okay, you can have the permit, but we're going to make it public so that every newspaper can put your name in there saying you own and carry a firearm, so we can bring pressure against you, things of that nature. And then, of course, the two big ones are so-called semi-automatic firearms that they like to call assault weapons, so restrictions on those, and large capacity magazines. So we're in court on those right now. When we had filed pre-Bruen, knowing we were going to win Bruen, we really felt that was a winning case, with challenging Maryland's assault weapon ban, which then, of course, got sort of overturned or remanded back down for retrial, by the U.S. Supreme Court as part of their Bruen decision, or right after the decision.
Right.
And Maryland now, we're looking to overturn the Maryland semi-automatic ban, which will then affect a number of other states as well. So we're kind of excited in those areas. And then, of course, we have a lot of magazine ban litigation that was filed pre-Bruen as well, knowing that we were going to win. We have, like here in Washington State, my home state, which banned magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. The sale, you keep the ones you had, but no new sale or manufacture of those. They thought that Washington State thought that was going to be a slam dunk win, and then post Bruen, now they're backtracking about how much harder it's going to be for them to win the case, and they're whining and crying a whole lot. So those are sort of my tier one category of cases, and then we're looking.
And then, so how do you decide what's in tier one and what's in tier two?
Well, I think by the tier one cases are the ones we think we have the better chances of winning no matter what, and the tier two ones are like a hair below those. So we're sort of doing it, where we think we can actually accomplish the mission and win for Second Amendment rights. Our slogan has been winning Second Amendment rights one lawsuit at a time. We're kind of, moving in that direction, and Bruen just makes it easier for us.
And so what are just one or two examples of tier two?
Well, tier two, excessive training regulations, where in order to get this permit, they're going to make you, go through unbelievable amounts of training. And look, you have some places now, like New York City could be an example, where they're going to make you go through a lot of training, but there aren't a whole lot of gun ranges. And the training, you're looking at, 15 hours or so, and on range training, there aren't enough ranges in New York City to be able to accommodate that. So by putting a lot of range training in and knowing there's no place to get the training, they're able to thwart your Second Amendment rights. We had this situation in Chicago when we won the McDonald suit at the Supreme Court and knocked out the gun ban in Chicago. The city of Chicago said you had to have range training to get the permit to own a firearm in your own home, except they banned gun ranges in Chicago. And so we filed the Ezell 1, I call it, case, and knocked out the ban on ranges in Chicago. And so then they came back and Chicago passed, okay, you can have ranges, but the ranges have to be set up certain ways, and made it in a way that was impossible to build out a range anyway. So we filed again in Ezell 2, and we knocked out that in Chicago as well. So this is kind of what we're looking at. The anti-gunners aren't going to give up. They're going to keep, pushing any way they can to make it hard and restrict gun rights. And so we're looking at those kind of cases. And we've already had success before, but I think we're going to win on those. And then the 18 to 20-year-old, where they don't want to give permits to people to either own or carry a firearm if you're a young adult. We have a lot of those cases pre-filed, pre-Bruen already, and we're looking at filing some more of those. And then we're looking at, a lot of states where they can let you carry concealed, but they won't let you carry opened at all. We now think there's an opening there that at least, they'd have to let you have a permit to carry openly. They can't just ban it either. Storage laws. A lot of places have passed before. We've already won on some of these cases, but we're seeing a pushback against this. So, okay, you can now own this gun, but you have to store it, carry it in certain ways that make it useless. And we're looking at that. We're looking at, again, range restrictions by various townships and cities where, okay, you can have gun ranges, but, they're non-usable, so to speak, or we make it next to impossible to build them. And then the banning on self-made firearms. It's been a long American tradition that you can make your own firearm in your own home. And we're getting an awful lot of pushback now post-Bruen in that area, where more and more places are passing laws saying you can't, make your own firearm. And we're also seeing these, what they call anti-arsenal laws, where, you can only have so much ammunition or own only so many guns. And we're going to limit the amount of guns or ammunition you can have. And, as a result, that's our feeling of infringement of Second Amendment rights. And it's tier two, because it's new ground to cover, but Bruen, again, helps us out that way as well. And then we got some tier three stuff too, dealing with the FFLs, licensing of FFLs, and how FFLs get treated. We're looking at just regulation of self-made firearms, where they'll let you have it, but they regulate it in crazy ways. The handgun rosters, where a lot of handguns can't be sold in some states. We've had some suits in the past. We've both, that are still being litigated, and some we've lost, which now I think come back. We're at more power when they're brewing to bring those cases back. Again, penalizing firearms owners to be able to get information from the government on how they're regulating your guns, or their behind the scenes anti-gun activities. They're trying to protect that, so we can't sue to get that kind of information. And likewise, again, trying to make a lot of gun owner information public to the public, so that your privacy rights are really violated. And there's red flag laws is another area in our tier 3, which don't provide due process in their procedures. So those are our tier 3s, and I'm looking at some tier 4 stuff coming up now. That's new stuff that we haven't even thought of. That the other side's coming up with is all new laws to infringe on Second Amendment rights. And so,
like what?
Well, like we had in California just now, when we just filed suit against that one. So it was tier 4, but we've already filed it, where any advertising or any mention of guns that might entice minors to be interested in firearms is now illegal, and you can go to jail or be fined for it, which kills all youth sports shooting, safety training, and it doesn't allow, like the Second Amendment Foundation, to even talk about gun rights to young adults, because they might want to then own a firearm. And so we're really upset about that. And likewise, that particular law, while it bans the firearms industry from, putting out information that reaches minors, it doesn't do that to the anti-gun people. So they can put out everything about how guns are evil and kids should never own a gun when they grow up. That's okay in California. But to advocate that, you should have the right to own a gun, that's another story.